Good morning and welcome to the Premier Football Podcast. On today's show, money, 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 money. We talk project big picture. Yesterday, obviously, Liverpool and Manchester United revealed their plans for a new format of the Premier League. We'll talk about that in depth. We'll talk about the proposed, not the proposed plans, the actual plans for the pay-per-view on Sky box office for the games that aren't on television. There was some football happening as well. We've got all the international roundup from the UEFA Nations League and from the Euro 2020 playoffs. But first, Joe, how are you getting on this morning?
Very good, Rafe. How are you? Feeling fresh?
I wouldn't go as far as feeling fresh. I'm still recovering from that nasty dose of whatever you gave me on Tuesday morning on our walk around the park.
Yeah, that was terrible. We don't need to go into that in great depth, but it's great that we're both on the mend at last, because it's been a rough few days, to say the least.
It has, and it's been a rough weekend for a lot of football fans that would have kind of tried to grasp this news that's been coming out. Obviously, the story broke at the end of last week that the Premier League were unveiling plans for this pay-per-view television system, so that the games that weren't initially designated to Sky and BT were now going to be shown on Sky box office for a cost of $14.95 in pounds sterling. That is, of course, per game. Joe, what do you make of that to start?
I think that the fact that they have gone through with this and set the price at £14.95 per game, it shows just how out of touch those at the top of the game are with the average fan. Let's not forget that this is in the middle of a global pandemic at a time where hundreds of thousands of people in the United Kingdom, if not millions, have lost their jobs and are on social welfare payments. But to then be charging fans £15 to watch a game of football, it's just ridiculous. I mean, in some clubs, you might get an away ticket for £15 to go and watch the game.
Yeah,
like it's just ridiculous. It really shows how. I mean, if it was a fiver, maybe it would be more palatable. But £15 is. I know it's not a great deal of money, but I mean, at the same time, for what you're getting to watch, it is.
Well, I think there's a few things about the cost of it. The reaction seems to have been that a handful of things are going to happen. Either people are going to come together to watch the games, they're going to gather when they shouldn't be gathering to pay for it and watch it, or they're going to end up streaming it online. And we'll talk about that, I suppose, in a minute. But the cost of it itself, it's not just the £15 per game. I mean, the people have got to have Sky already. So they're paying whatever it is, £80 a month for their whole TV subscription. These people that are paying to watch football are paying £25 a month for their BT. You know, they might be paying £10 or £15 a month for Amazon Prime or whatever it is, because they have a couple of games. So those are three platforms already that are showing it. And now on top of that, they're being asked to fork out for up to half of the matches that won't be televised. I don't know how many matches are televised on Sky and BT every weekend. 4 or 5 games maybe televised between the two on BT and 3 on Sky.
I think it's more than that. I think it's 8. Don't they have nearly all of them at the moment? Or you mean in normal?
At the moment, they've been showing them for free because people haven't been going to the games, but they're going back to essentially what was the old schedule, where they'll have maybe 5 or 6 games shown at the weekend. So then there's another 4. So there's a chance that you could be paying possibly over £100 a month, and then still end up paying more money every single week to watch your team if your team's not been selected for one of the televised games. And of course, it's going to be a case where the most popular teams are either going to be the ones that are selected to be shown on TV because they're more popular, or the more popular teams are going to be the pay-per-view ones because there's more money, more chance to cash in on that. It won't be spread evenly between the clubs, I can't imagine.
And how does that money trickle down then? I haven't read too much into the after effects. Is it all going to Sky or the Premier League?
So
Premier League clubs must be getting some.
The £15 is going directly to the clubs involved. It's in lieu of match day earnings that are lost, essentially.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, 19 of the Premier League teams voted in favour of this proposal. There was one Premier League team, Leicester, that voted against it, but all of the other Premier League clubs were in favour of charging their fans this money to watch them on TV.
Yeah, so it's to basically make up for tickets.
Essentially.
Clearly, yeah. Obviously, it's a lower price for home match day tickets, but I mean, when you think about how much you have to pay to have to legally have all of the live Premier League football that you want already, it's just a bit unfair to be charging that much on top of it. For me, I think that I can't see too many people getting behind this. No. The reaction from the media and from fans on social media and calling into radio stations has been very negative, and it'll be interesting to see what the take-up is, because people just aren't going to be willing to spend that amount of money every week when they can stream it for free, because everyone knows that you can find streams available. So why are you going to be paying that extra £15 every week?
Exactly. I mean, I think it'll likely, out of principle, drive a lot of people towards the streaming model that have never actually done it before. The amount of conversation I've seen online of people asking, how do I actually stream a game? What are the boxes that I can buy for my living room that have all these channels on them? You know, what are the websites online? And I think this could possibly be a big nail in the coffin of televised Premier League games, because this could mark the beginning of the decline for them.
Do you know what? We've talked about this before privately, but for how other streaming services have gone about making their business model affordable for the masses, you can think of Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney being the three biggest ones. And I mean, what, you pay a maximum of about 10 euro a month? I think Netflix is only 7.
More.
Maybe,
well, I think it depends
10,
on your yeah. I think it's close.
Yeah, maybe it was originally 7 when you first signed up. But I mean, we've talked about this before. I think that they need to have a centralized streaming service for the Premier League where you can have every game available and it can be at an affordable price. I mean, maybe not as cheap as the likes of Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime, but if it was, say, 20, 30 pounds, £25, 30 euro a month, and you could watch every single Premier League game that you wanted, I think that you'd see a lot of buy-in, and that would be from fans around the world as well, not just in the UK and Ireland.
Like I said, there are a lot of people paying £25 a month for BT Sports already, solely to watch the Premier League on top of their Sky Sports package or whatever it is. And then that's
just 2 games a week.
And in a lot of places around the world, they do have the type of services that you're talking about. In Australia, in Europe, in America, they have these packages that you get all of the Champions League games, all of the Premier League games included in your package, and it's £100 a year or £20 a month or whatever it is. And I think a great example of the kind of stuff you were talking about there is look at the way the music industry has gone. I mean, when everything went online first initially, and obviously you used to go and buy your records, or when it got to the stage where downloads started, you would have downloaded your MP3 onto iTunes or whatever it was, but it would have cost you like £3 for a single. You know, and
I still buy my records. I do have to say that. That's just because I have
but you also have a Spotify account.
I do, which I use much more than I use my vinyl records. The vinyl records is more to, even I have many that I haven't even opened because you want to kind of maintain the value of them.
But imagine every time you wanted to listen to a new song that you'd never heard before, you had to pay €3 to download it on iTunes for every single new song. Yeah,
but they realized that wasn't sustainable anymore.
Yeah.
The people just weren't going to, I mean, the likes of LimeWire, do you remember the illegal downloading site? Yeah. Everyone just hopped onto there, and then you could easily transfer all of your downloaded music over to your iTunes store anyway, and no one would really know. You know, you'd have to have your computer hacked for people to find that out.
And they realized that something like this, a streaming service, needed to be affordable for the masses, that people would pay a few quid a month to access the content. Otherwise, they were just going to steal it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people are like. It's logical. I think that, you know, they're trying to avoid going to a property. You know, they're trying to support the Premier League clubs while the TV networks are being supported at the same time. But at the end of the day, the people that matter most in all of this are the fans, and this is not supportive towards the fans. And we've seen it with, you know, you mentioned music, but there could be a football revolution in terms of fans where they just stop paying for these subscriptions and start only watching on illegal streams. Obviously, you'll have the hosts of those illegal streams who are still paying for the subscriptions, but that's a small portion compared to what you have now, where most football fans will be a subscriber to Sky and BT. But it's going to move away from that, and in my opinion, it's something to look forward to. Where I'm a big fan of these centralized streaming platforms for films, television, and for music.
And I suppose the biggest injustice is that, like I said, it is more accessible and it is cheaper around the world. And it's a British product at the end of the day. And it's the British people that are paying more for one of their greatest exports around the world.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not being managed correctly at home.
Well, some people would tell you it's being managed correctly because they're making a lot of money from it. But it's always the people that seem to be paying more,
Yes, it's inherently capitalistic, isn't it?
Well, I suppose that brings us on to our next point, the project big picture. You talk about something that's inherently capitalistic. Right. This is something that FSG have apparently been working on since 2017. They've had it in the framework, and it's been accelerated because of the pandemic. And man, that just seems really like, that I'm a massive Liverpool fan, but this just seems really opportunistic and sly and sneaky. And they've gone in with the Glazers on this as well. I think we'll probably put a link to your Glazers video here as well, because it's really similar to what they've done with Manchester United, where they've seen the club at a really low point, at a really weak point, and they've gone in and they've seized power and taken control. And I feel that the two American consortiums here are working together to just seize control of the Premier League.
They are. They've seen what's happening with clubs of the lower league clubs whose income is predominantly, almost entirely, through match day revenue, and that's been completely slashed. And they've gone and they've offered the EFL and EFL clubs huge amounts of money to convince them to get behind this proposal, which effectively gives it centralizes all decision-making power in the Premier League to the so-called Big Six: Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Tottenham. This is disgraceful. I'm so surprised that Liverpool are behind this, and how out of touch are Liverpool's owners with the city of Liverpool, which is a predominantly working-class city, rooted in Labour Party and trade union and community values. And this is the complete polar opposite of this. I haven't seen the reaction from Liverpool fans, but I would be so surprised if they're not up in arms about this, because it goes against everything that the city of Liverpool is about, which is inclusion and togetherness, and I mean, leaving Everton out of it.
Well, no, I think that they have given extra voting rights to the three other clubs, to Everton, to West Ham and Southampton, but the voting rights. The rights don't count for the same. I think the Big Six only need the support of six other clubs to push through something that they want, whereas one of those clubs would need the support of the established nine. But you have Everton. You have Everton, who are the longest standing team in the English First Division, along with
Arsenal.
Well, depending on whether you consider Arsenal to actually should have been relegated at some stage.
But they weren't,
because they were corrupt back then, and they're still corrupt.
They're not. Anyway, no, I agree. Everton are the second longest team in the first division, in the top flight of English.
Massively long-standing. But then you've got the likes of Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur that are involved in this Big Six, ahead of the likes of Aston Villa, like European
and Leeds
Cup
United,
winners, Leeds United, Newcastle United,
Leicester City. Premier League champions 4 years ago.
When was the last time Spurs won the Premier League?
Never. The last time Spurs won the league was in 1961-62, I believe.
Joe,
so almost 60 years.
Aston Villa spent 1 year in the Championship since the formation of the Premier League last year. Manchester City have spent 1 year in League One since the formation of the Premier League.
Yeah, they have, in 1998-99.
How many years have Newcastle spent in the Championship?
Two seasons. They weren't in the very first year. They got promoted from the first division in 92-93. So that's 3 seasons.
And how many have City spent in the Championship? 4?
Loads. I mean, they were there at the start. I don't know exactly, but they were there at the start. Then they got relegated, and they came back, and they got relegated, and they came back again. So they've been out of the top flight at least 3 times.
The biggest question that I suppose I would have with the voting rights, can other clubs earn them through longevity, or what happens, say, if Southampton and West Ham get relegated and come back up? Do they get their voting rights back?
I suppose it must go to the next, right? And then they've lost their voting rights.
You suppose that, but does it though?
I'm not 100% sure. I mean, that would make sense, right? I mean, if West Ham get relegated hypothetically, or Southampton, or one of the big 6, like, then they're no longer a Premier League club, so they can't have any say in what happens in the Premier League. Surely,
you would think so. But does somebody else inherit those voting rights? Is what I kind of want to know.
Yeah, like, it must go to the next place team. I don't know. Is it Leicester City?
Well, do you want to know who's actually more long-standing than Leicester City in the Premier League? That's in between West Ham and Leicester.
Crystal Palace.
It's Crystal Palace, yeah, and they've been in the league for 8 years.
Yeah.
So are we giving voting rights to Crystal Palace ahead of champions Leicester City, or are we just not giving voting rights? Does it have to be always 9 teams? What if Crystal Palace, Leicester can stay in the Premier League, and West Ham and Southampton stay in the Premier League, and we come to a point where Leicester and Palace have been in the league for 15 years or 20 years?
Yeah.
And Leicester are winning it every 2 or 3 years, and they still don't have voting rights.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I understand why the EFL have voted in favor, because of the money. That was a bribe.
Well, let's talk about the EFL for a second, and who's come out and
who's
given
in
their
charge?
Support.
Yeah.
Now, it's Rick Perry, a name that might sound familiar to those that are aware or are familiar with Liverpool Football Club. This is straight from Wikipedia, the shortened version of who Rick Parry is. So Rick Parry is the current chairman of the EFL, the former chief executive of Liverpool Football Club, the original CEO of the Premier League, and a board member of the New York Cosmos. He's from Merseyside, United Kingdom, and was educated in the University of Liverpool.
Yeah, so he's a Liverpool lad through and through. I don't understand, like, given his interests, you can kind of get it, but with that Liverpool background, it's just such an anti-Liverpool thing to do, isn't it?
Well, it's anti-Liverpool City values, but it's very pro-Liverpool Football Club in terms of handing them the keys to the gate of the Premier League, you know?
Yeah, it is. It is.
It bangs of cronyism.
It does. It does. This is. I mean, for me, this isn't what English football is all about. A lot of people might say this is what the Premier League is about. It was created to be an elitist competition, but I don't think that's necessarily true. It was, the spectacle that it's become is fantastic, but going down this model is going to be a disaster for football.
Well, look, people might have said that pre-formation of the Premier League in 1992. Obviously, we were born in 1992. We don't remember the old First Division. I'm sure that people were very skeptical of the change. The 18 teams thing seems totally unnecessary to me, and we'll talk about the money for the EFL in a minute. But I'll just read you out the Premier League statement, if that's okay, in relation to the proposed changes. They say, we have seen media reports today regarding plan to restructure football in this country. English football is the world's most watched and has a vibrant, dynamic and competitive league structure that drives interest around the globe. To maintain this position, it's important that we all work together. Both the Premier League and the FA support a wide range of discussions on the future of the game, including its competition structures, calendar and overall financing, particularly in light of the effects of COVID-19. Football has many stakeholders, therefore this work should be carried out through the proper channels, enabling all clubs and stakeholders the opportunity to contribute. In the Premier League's view, a number of individual proposals in this plan published today could have a damaging impact on the whole game, and we are disappointed to see that Rick Parry, chair of the EFL, has given his on-the-record support. The Premier League has been working in good faith with its clubs and the EFL to seek a resolution to the requirement for COVID-19 rescue funding. This work will continue. So they're not in favor of it. They're disappointed in Rick Parry. They see it as potentially damaging and harmful. And I suppose what's given this proposal a platform or a springboard is the government's cry for help last week in the UK. They've obviously asked the Premier League and the bigger clubs to help out with the smaller clubs, because they're saying that we're not going to bail them out. You guys have to look after it. And the Premier League themselves are saying, well, we don't have the money ourselves to do it. So we're looking at the clubs to give maybe a loan, but there's no guarantees for the Premier League clubs if they give out these big loans to the EFL clubs that they're going to get it back. You know, they could end up folding their low interest loans. And ultimately, we know that the people in charge of these big Premier League clubs are shrewd businessmen, if nothing else. You know, the Glazers aren't in it for the love of football. Levy's not in it for the love of football. The Cronkies aren't in it for the love of football. You know, FSG, clearly they're not in it for the love of football. Look, they enjoy the game. They love being sports owners. They love going and watching it. But we saw it even with the furloughs at the start of the pandemic at Spurs, at Liverpool, at a host of other Premier League clubs, that the people at the top, they are businessmen at the end of the day, and there's nothing in it for them giving out these low interest loans. So they want something back. What they're saying is that they're going to give £250 million to the EFL, £100 million to the FA. They're going to give 25% of the Premier League's earnings every year to the EFL. And, you know, that does sound like something that the EFL could get behind, because it's a lot of money that they desperately need and money that they're not getting. Mm. But maybe there's an argument to say that the Premier League should just be contributing 25% every year anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that would be much fairer than concentrating all of the power at the very, very top of the Premier League. I mean, it's great. I have to say, it's great, the financial incentives that they are offering to the EFL and to the EFL clubs. That's really, really, really positive. But it's completely tainted because of everything else, because of how they're trying. It's a complete power grab, man. It's going to turn it into a Big Six dictatorship, and they're just going to be I don't know. Do you think it's going to lead eventually, inevitably, to a European Super League? It kind of.
No, I don't think it will, actually. I think that if it was to be rejected, or if it was to be totally thrown out, I think that then Liverpool and United might go looking for a Super League, because obviously, look, Liverpool and United have the power here, and that's probably what the most frustrating thing is for everybody. Liverpool and United are the most watched teams around the world from the Premier League. You know,
yeah.
I'm sitting here in Dublin as a lifelong Liverpool fan. You know, my dad wasn't a Liverpool fan, no one in my family was. That's all just come from media influence, and it's the same all around the world. You know, there are Liverpool fans and United fans right around the world that will pay to watch Liverpool play, whether it's in a 20-team Premier League, an 18-team Premier League, a 10-team European Super League, whatever it is. There are people that just want to watch their team play, and it doesn't really matter to them whether they're playing Stoke or whether they're playing Barcelona. They'll tune in and watch them. You know, and they've got this global audience. So, I mean, the game is gone in a way from England because of the international interest. The international interests are now so big in some of these top teams that they do have this power.
Of course, man. You see when, I don't know, Manchester United, Liverpool as well, but if you take my club, Arsenal, when Arsenal go on pre-season tours to, I don't know, Arsenal went to Singapore 2 years ago and played in a super tournament against Paris Saint-Germain and Atletico Madrid. And the only fans in the stadium in every game were Arsenal fans, local Arsenal fans from Southeast Asia, some from the Middle East. I mean, the global appeal of the Premier League is unparalleled. There are pockets around the world, certainly in Latin America, where you'd have the likes of Barcelona and Real Madrid being very popular, but that's about it. And predominantly around the rest of the world, it's the Premier League. So you're completely right that the game has gone in that sense. However, taking it doesn't need to be more globalized. I honestly think we're at a peak, and if we go over that, then it's not going to be the Premier League is an English league. So, yeah.
But we talk about those big teams now. Let's have a look at the big six. Manchester United, owned by Americans. Liverpool, owned by Americans. Arsenal, owned by Americans. Manchester City, owned by the Middle East.
Yeah.
You look at Chelsea, owned by Russians. You look at Spurs. Dan Levy where is Dan Levy from?
Dan Levy's not the owner, man. He's the chairman.
He's the chairman. I don't actually know.
The owner's a guy called Joe Lewis, who's British billionaire. So
Okay.
they'll be the one in the top six who are in the big six who are still run by a British holding company.
Like these people don't necessarily care about what people in England think. This is a global investment for them. So where I'm going with this big rant is that I think if Manchester United and Liverpool and a few others wanted to go and start their Super League, they already have the power to do that. You know, there's nothing stopping them going and doing that. I think what they're proposing now is actually more a commitment to the Premier League. They want to make the Premier League more globally appealing so that they don't need to go in pursuit of a Super League, if that almost makes sense. The idea is to improve the quality by trimming some of the fat down off the bottom.
Absolute nonsense. One of the best things about the Premier League is the relegation scrap. And I mean, we just saw, not that they're going to get relegated, we just saw Aston Villa smash Liverpool 7-2 last week. You often see teams lower down the table. I mean, this year they do seem to be particularly weak if you think of the likes of Fulham and West Brom and Burnley and Sheffield United. But last year, Sheffield United finished 9th and they were in the top 6 for the majority of the season. I completely disagree with that. Trimming it down to 18, I don't get it. There are plenty of teams in the Championship who could come up and you think of the likes of Brentford, although they do seem to be losing all of their quality players, but they're going to have a lot of cash available to reinvest. So no, I'm a traditionalist at heart, and I completely disagree with this format to move to 18 teams, to get rid of 2 teams altogether from the Football League, because they're going to keep the number of teams in the Championship, League 1 and League 2 at 24, and they're going to lose 2 teams somehow. So it's going to be from League 2, I suppose. 2 teams, well, just
unless 2 teams go out of business, which is quite possible in the current.
Unless that happens,
yeah. I suppose the other thing they do want to get rid of the Community Shield and the League Cup. So they're trimming down the number of games that the Premier League clubs are expected to play. So maybe trimming 4 games off your season, in terms of 2 homes and 2 aways, but a couple of less teams. That's 4 games. You lose the League Cup games. That's another 3 or 4 games. You know, is that part of it as well?
No, I don't know, man. The League Cup is neither here nor there for me. I could take it or leave it. If it didn't exist, I'd be perfectly fine. The Community Shield, the money from that game goes to charity, and it's a great way to start the English season.
It's also 1 game between 2 teams. It doesn't affect everybody.
No, it doesn't, but it's a nice way to start the English season. I
quite like it as well. I've always enjoyed it as a curtain raiser.
I think it's great, and you often get an upset. You get a look at new players. It's, you know, as a traditionalist, I think it's a great spectacle, and the fact that the money from the game goes to charity is a positive thing, and to take that away is going to have a negative impact unless they reinvest that money elsewhere.
It's also nice that the champions from last year get to open the season again.
It is, yeah, absolutely, and the champions of the FA Cup. It's an English Super Cup, and it's nice. I enjoy the Community Shield. League Cup, take it or leave it. It can go.
See, the only thing, if the Community Shield was to stay, though, and you talk about it as an English Super Cup, what we've seen in other countries, I think in Spain and Italy, they've moved their Super Cup, their Community Shield, whatever you call it, they've moved it abroad, and they play it as a moneymaker in different countries in the Middle East or in Asia or wherever it is. They'll actually play that game somewhere else, in an attempt to raise awareness and raise money about the league. I don't know if that's something you'd prefer rather than getting rid of it.
I don't know. It's a very American thing to do. Obviously, the NFL, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the biggest changing rooms, as everyone knows from watching the All or Nothing documentary on Amazon, in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium are NFL changing rooms. And they have a deal in place with the NFL to put on a certain, obviously it's not happening now, but to put on a certain number of games every year. I mean, that's obviously a very American thing, to bring the NFL to Europe, to bring it to London. You know, it's already happening, as you mentioned, with the likes of La Liga. So if it were to happen with the Premier League, I don't think it's the worst thing. But it's nice to have it at Wembley at the same time.
Okay. Before we wrap up part 1, Joe, do you have anything else to throw on about the money?
No, not really, Rafe. I guess the one thing we haven't added, but I'm sure everyone will be aware, is that they propose to scrap parachute payments. So the increase in funds available to EFL clubs is probably making up for that. So they're not going to be going through a parachute payments anymore.
Yeah,
which is probably a good thing.
It probably is, because we see a lot of teams focus solely on getting up and then not really worrying about Norwich last year, for example, had no real desire to stay in the league because they knew that if they went back down, they collect their parachute payments, and so long as they didn't over-invest in the Premier League, that they'd be okay financially at the end of it. Like,
yeah, I it doesn't provide clubs with the financial with the right incentive to compete properly in the Premier League.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's the end of part one. On to part two, Joe. We'll talk about the actual football. Oh my days. It goes from bleak to bleaker for the Irish people over here. Obviously, Ireland were knocked out by Slovakia in a penalty shootout on Thursday evening. In an absolutely dire game of football. Ireland probably had the better of the chances, and sadly went out on a night that Northern Ireland and Scotland did progress on penalty shootouts. I suppose before we do talk too much about the football, I would like to have another rant at the fact that these games actually went ahead and were played in the middle of a global pandemic, that we burst all the league bubbles and these players were sent all around the world, and we had different positive tests, backroom staffs and players that massively affected the games. Yeah, I just think it was incredibly foolish, especially for the non-essential games, whatever about the playoff games, to force the Nations League games to be played at the moment is just absolutely bizarre and peculiar. I don't know how you feel about that.
I completely agree, Rafe. I think it's the complete wrong time. Excuse me. I think it's the complete wrong time to be playing international football. We've seen in the Premier League that there have, your club at Liverpool, Thiago Alcantara, Sadio Mane, both
Xherdan Shaqiri.
Xherdan Shaqiri as well. Even these protected bubbles that they're in the Premier League are not working to their, but naturally so. It was always going to be like this. But taking it abroad, where you're then interacting with so many other people, and you have, if you're even what's it called, a close contact. If you're a close contact, we've seen it with the Ireland squad that 5 players had to miss the second game, the draw with Wales, because they were in close proximity to one person who did test positive, even though they didn't test positive, and now they have to then self-isolate for 14 days in total, and they're going to miss club football when they get back to the UK. So it's just the repercussions of going ahead with the Nations League fixtures now are going to have a detrimental impact to squad availability in the Premier League and the EFL, and in Europe as well, obviously.
Yeah, and I think obviously even for the playoff game, Slovakia's team was affected by COVID. They were missing Skriniar of note at the back and a couple of other players as well. But it was announced on the day that Ireland were going to be missing Aaron Connolly and Adam Ida. Aaron Connolly, who's due to start the game, and Ida coming off the bench, is obviously highly rated, and it was the forwards that they missed in that game, and they missed that game because there was a positive test in the backroom staff. Someone that was drafted to replace earlier positive COVID tests in the backroom staff. This individual was drafted in. They tested positive on the last test in Dublin. That it was only found out on the day of the game, and because Connolly and Ida were seated in the wrong part of the plane. For some reason, they were seated at the back with the technical staff, and no one told them they weren't meant to be sitting there because they were there for 4 hours or something, 1.9 meters and 1.7 meters away from this backroom staff member. They were ruled out of the game. Now, it's come out since that this is potentially a false positive in the backroom staff that's ruled these guys out, and you really have to look at it now, and obviously look, it's sour grapes from my part because Ireland aren't going to the Euros. But if you look at how poor Ireland were in front of goal, and you think, God, if we had a Premier League striker up top capable of putting the ball in the back of the net, maybe Ireland would be going to the Euros, or not going to the Euros, but going to a playoff against Northern Ireland. How historic would that be? the Republic of Ireland versus Northern Ireland in a playoff for the European Championships. And look, obviously, best of luck to Northern Ireland against Slovakia, and best of luck to Scotland, and they got through their penalties. Ireland missed their penalties, Slovakia scored theirs, so ultimately they were affected as well. But it just, when you've got players ruled out on both sides for COVID, it just doesn't feel like a real spectacle. We spoke about the Premier League teams breaking up. Like, there was 19 positive tests in the Premier League in the 2 weeks before they broke up. Now, the players are all returning from international duty on Thursday to their clubs, and then there are Premier League games on Saturday.
Yeah, they have to get tested when they get back, so then the test probably won't come through until Friday,
or even Saturday morning.
Yeah, managers are going to be having to change their teams around on the day. Man, it's so far from ideal, it's beyond belief. Just what's the priority? I think that's the big thing that you have to realize that.
Well, Joe, we spoke about it at the start of the show. Money.
If there's money to be made, make it. No, we don't advocate. Live and let live. But you know what I mean, man? It's just, you have to prioritize. You have to be sensible about this, and regardless of the financial implications and the historic implications of making sure that the international football takes place. Bigger picture here, we're in the middle of a global pandemic and flying loads of lads around on planes. It's not being advised for anyone else. So why is it being allowed to happen and encouraged to happen for footballers? And with so many positive tests, there are negative repercussions. People are testing positive for a potential deadly virus.
They were playing international friendlies last week.
Yeah, they were.
International friendlies.
Yeah.
Like in empty stadiums. International friendlies in empty stadiums.
Yeah, it's baffling. It's shocking. It's shocking. It's outrageous. Carry on.
It's really gone a little bit too far. But anyway, look, we will talk about some of the actual football. I don't want to talk about Ireland playing football. They did play a Nations League game against Wales again yesterday. You'd be shocked to hear, if you didn't watch the game, that it finished 0-0. And
I watched the highlight. That I watched the highlights.
Well, tell us about the highlights there, Joe.
There wasn't much, Rafe. There's a big surprise here. Shane Long missed a glorious header from pretty close to make it 1-0 to Ireland, and he put it over the bar. And the other notable incident was James McLean getting sent off. Listen, he was unlucky for the first yellow card. He accidentally clipped his opponent's heels, and it was a blatant accident. He wasn't looking at him. The other lad had nowhere to go.
He can't complain though, because he took him out. It was a yellow card.
And the second one. The second one is a loose ball that goes astray, and James McLean just keeps on running, and he doesn't stop, and he just goes right through him. Man, it could have been a red.
Joe, it was a dive. There was no contact.
He went right through him, man.
Joe, he's leapt over it. There's no contact there at all.
For me, it was the yellow card. He went.
Oh, it was a dive. It was a blatant dive. It was a blatant dive. He's leaped over it like a salmon. There's absolutely no contact. He's bought it.
The salmon of knowledge.
Do you think James McLean, I asked you this yesterday, do you think he's having a good weekend?
Well, think about it. He got a red card for what he thought was grossly unjust, and he gets to fly back to Stoke.
Well, following up on getting knocked out from the Euros in the manner that they were in Slovakia on Thursday, they fly back to Dublin.
Yeah.
Was the game in Dublin, or was it in?
It was in the Aviva. Yeah, he gets sent off in a dead rubber friendly.
In a Nations League game.
Oh, sorry, it was a Nations League group.
It was a Nations League game. Yeah. So another game that's obviously frustrating, having to pick yourself back up from that and go and play against Wales for the 20th time in the last 2 years or whatever it is, because they seem to face each other every 2 weeks at the moment. Another game that's not going to plan, and he gets sent off for what he feels like is a clear dive. Now, like I said to you, there was some good news for him, that he got to leave the Toxic Ireland camp before they're forced to trek to Finland on Wednesday night. But like you said, he gets the reward of a trip back to Stoke, where he can train for the rest of the week in preparation.
Still on tread, and then reconvene for some championship fixtures. Yeah.
And look, nothing against Stoke. Your dad's from Stoke, isn't he?
My dad is from Stoke. Yeah, I have family living in Stoke, but it's not the prettiest part of the UK. I think it would be fair to say. It's not top of the list. It's top of the list for tourist attractions, apart from Alton Terrace.
Okay, so good news for Northern Ireland this week, good news for Scotland, bad news for the Republic of Ireland. And do you want to tell us how England have gotten
on? Good news for England. Very surprised, obviously beating Belgium 2-1 yesterday at Wembley. Romelu Lukaku was taken out by Eric Dyer in the box. It was an awful tackle. Dyer can have no complaints, and Lukaku smashed it home. He played very well, and he very much had a point to prove against, obviously, he will feel he was never truly appreciated in England by the media and by the fans. But England hit back, and Marcus Rashford tucked away a penalty very nicely. And then there was some degree of fortune in Mason Mount's winner, which seemed to be heading rather tamely into the keeper's arms, but took a massive deflection and looped over Thibaut Courtois into the back of the net. The
some discussion
team selection.
So before we talk about the team, some discussion over Jordan Henderson's efforts to win the penalty. He seemed to go down rather easily under the contact and let out a rather loud scream for a few fingers on his shoulder. Has he been training with Mo Salah too much, maybe, or is it good football? You know, has he done the right thing and won his team a spot kick?
It's good for it's. You know what I feel about winning free kicks and penalties. It's stupid from Meunier. He puts his hands on him. Why are you doing that? You can't do that. There are cameras everywhere. You give yourself no chance. Henderson's won a penalty smartly. You might say, I mean, it's gamesmanship, but that's part of the game, isn't it? You play to win, and he got his team a penalty, and Rashford tucked it away. For a lot of people, they won't like to see that, but Meunier puts his hands on him, and you're not allowed to do that, and he does try to tug him back, and Henderson just takes the contact and makes the most of it and goes over. And he made the referee know what happened, which is very important.
And easy to do in an empty stadium.
It certainly is, yeah. But no, honestly, the team selection, I think.
Well, Joe, back to England's best, playing players out of position, playing dull, unattractive football, grinding out results. You love to see it, don't you?
He must have spoken to Sam Allardyce on the phone before selecting that team. Shocking. Five at the back. Kieran Trippier playing left wing back when he could have selected Ainsley. I know Ainsley Maitland-Niles is right-footed, but he's a much more attacking-minded player. Or Saka, who wasn't even in the squad in the end, he was left off the bench. But Trippier is not a left wing back. However, at the same time, he is a right back who plays under Diego Simeone. Might have been on the. I don't think so, man. I don't think because he didn't play in the first game either. In the friendly against Wales. Yeah, no, he can't have been. And yeah, then persevering with Dyer and Maguire and Kyle Walker at centre back.
Before taking off Trent Alexander-Arnold after about 70 minutes for Reece James.
Yeah. Nah, I'm not too sure. I'm really not too sure about that. And Dyer seems to give away a really high number of penalties when he plays centre back. Maguire
when he plays anywhere.
Poor form. Why didn't they play Connor Cody? Connor Cody's a really good centre back. I don't get it. And then playing Mason Mount ahead of Jack Grealish. Obviously, Mount got the winner, but he was anonymous for most of the game. And Grealish is just obviously so much better than him. It's not like Grealish doesn't work hard either. He does. He's England's most talented midfielder.
Now, obviously, Calvert-Lewin got the start up front in because Harry Kane was carrying a knock, coming back to full fitness. And I think you're going to do a piece this week about Everton and Ancelotti and Calvert-Lewin, and I'm really looking forward to it. But what I want to ask you is Danny Ings the most disrespected player in England right now?
No, because he's not.
What does he have to do to get an England team?
I think it might be impossible for him unless there are injuries. But because he's not the type of striker that England are looking for to start matches. He's not a hold up. Look at the team England selected yesterday. And then tell me why they should be picking Danny Ings ahead of Calvert-Lewin, because Danny Ings is not able to hold the ball up in the same way that Calvert-Lewin is. He's not able to win the ball in the air in the same way that Calvert-Lewin is.
He's better than Marcus Rashford, though.
Is he?
Yes. Marcus Rashford missed a host of chances yesterday.
He did. He had a great chance in the second. The thing is, he gets himself into these amazing positions, and then he tries to Cristiano Ronaldo it into the top corner. And he should just.
Do you know what Danny Ings does?
A little bit more simply.
Danny Ings gets into these positions and scores.
But this is where playing for a club like Southampton doesn't do you any favors, unfortunately.
And I would like to say some nice things about Marcus Rashford as well. Obviously, everything he's done politically in the last few months is obviously fantastic. Coming from a Liverpool fan, I'd love to see if when fans are allowed back in the stadium, him get a nice reception when they do go to Anfield, and maybe even a banner or something like that if fans aren't let in, because he has been absolutely fantastic. You know, he's lobbied against all sorts of tyranny and cronyism that we've spoken about, giving out about wealth at the top, dictating stuff for the people down the bottom. And look, fair play to Marcus Rashford for everything he's done off the pitch, but I don't think anything he's done on the pitch in the last year warrants him starting in an England shirt right now.
Ahead of Danny Ings, yeah. Well, I said I
ahead of Jack Grealish.
Yeah. I said I would have started Jadon Sancho up front. And let him drift wide, and let him have a free roll and let him drift wide. I think he's a better player. Yeah, but Marcus Rashford. Listen, Rashford's a very good player, but he's not in the best of form right now. But no United player is in the best of form right now. Pogba played very well for France, and Bruno Fernandes played very well for Portugal in their draw. A lot of people are saying that they looked like the players that they really are. So clearly, there's something not quite right in the Manchester United camp. And although you probably should, Southgate's always saying that he'll only pick players off form. That's just media talk. He clearly doesn't do that. If he did that, he would have been picking Danny Ings and he would have been picking Jack Grealish to play against Belgium.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. Before we wrap up, a couple of other bits of news. West Ham appear to have agreed a coup. Joe, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Brentford signing that the Brentford striker they're in to sign?
Yeah, so they've agreed, I think it's a £30 million fee with Brentford for Saïd Benrahma, who's a 25-year-old Algerian winger. And
he can play number 10 as well, can't he?
He wears number 10. Yeah, he can play number 10 as well. Yeah, I think he could probably play anywhere across the front line. He's right-footed, so he predominantly operates from the left in the modern system. But this is the best player that I've ever seen come out of the Championship. He is absolutely phenomenal. The set of skill that he has, how hard he works, how he can create for others, the goals. If anyone hasn't seen him play, just go to the Sky Sports Football YouTube page, and there's a recent video they put up with his best hits, I suppose you could call it, of the last 12 months. And he scores some great goals, but for me, how he creates goals for others is something that you don't see very often. And the manner in which he takes defenders out of the game and creates space for others and then plays the perfect pass is something that I'm really struggling to find a name of someone who does it as well as him. He's a great player, and that's a fantastic signing for West Ham. Obviously, it would have been a bit of a risk. He's never played in the Premier League before for a higher up the table club than West Ham to go and fork out £30 million for him. But if he does the business for West Ham, then expect his value to surge, and for clubs around the top six to be sniffing around come the end of the season.
And you talk about Premier League experience as well. They're looking for potentially Joshua King to join them. They've had a bid rejected for somewhere in the region of £13 million, I think.
That's it. Yeah, I think they'll probably have to go closer to 20. But again, he'd be a very good player. He can play anywhere along the front line, and has a track record of doing it in the Premier League.
Why are West Ham signing these good players from the Championship now? Why are Manchester United not doing this? Why are they spending £37 million on unproven 18-year-olds that have played 24 minutes of football in Serie A instead of taking this really good talent that's playing in England already and waiting till January to get this 18-year-old?
Yeah, it's crazy. Manchester United don't operate in a logical way. They try to they try to sign big names or from foreign leagues. They don't. Well, they just signed Daniel James last year, but they don't dip into the Championship too much. I think that it's really sensible from West Ham. We've seen Aston Villa do it this season. What's the name of the striker who scored a hat-trick against Liverpool? I'm not trying to bring back bad memories. It's gone out of my head. He also signed from Brentford, £28 million, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. But
Edwards?
No.
Anyway, we saw Jared Bowen come up for West Ham as well.
Exactly. And, I did a piece on West Ham doing transfers the wrong way, but I think I might have to revisit that later down the season after we see how those transfers work. Because, the Bowen signing is working so well. Thomas Souček is working so well. And now I expect Saïd Benrahma and Joshua King, if they get Joshua King over the line, to really improve their team.
The last piece of news, I suppose, this week is that it appears Ole Gunnar Solskjaer could be closer to losing his Manchester United job than ever before. Woodward appears to be at the end of his tether, and if results don't improve, it could be the end for him. This is the same week that we found out that Solskjaer had a deal agreed with Erling Braut Haaland for about 20 million to come to Manchester United. He had a deal agreed with Dortmund. He had met the player. They had personal terms agreed, and Woodward blocked it over agents' fees and a potential sell-on clause. Now, obviously, Haaland has gone on to score 21 goals in 23 appearances for Dortmund. He scored his first international hat-trick yesterday.
This is the same Ed Woodward who'd happily pay Edinson Cavani's agent 10 million euros for facilitating a free transfer. Who wouldn't pay? But the thing with Haaland is that is he a Raiola player or is his dad his agent?
He is a Raiola.
Yeah. So how it works is you have to pay Raiola a huge amount of money, and then you have to pay his dad Alf-Inge Haaland as well, because his dad has some sort of managerial role within that whole setup. So it is a complicated deal to get through, and we do know that although Dortmund paid a low fee to Red Bull Salzburg, the agent fees were high, and that 20 million euro wasn't the whole fee. That was just what they paid to Salzburg.
I think that Manchester United have some previous experience with Raiola as well, with Pogba and the likes, and I think they have kind of sworn never to do business with him again. And maybe we will do a feature piece on agents at some stage, because we seem to be talking about them every single week, and they are obviously more prevalent in the game with them leveraging their big player, forcing moves for smaller players around the world with promises of eventually being big players, and it's a really murky world. And maybe we will talk about it, but look, we're about an hour deep into the show now. We don't have time for it. I'm going to cut it there. I'm going to end it. Joe, I'm sorry that it was such a miserable show. I hope I haven't ruined your week, got you off to a terrible start.
No, I've enjoyed it, Rafe. It's always great to chat football. Guys, as always, please don't forget to smash a like on the video, share the content around, subscribe if you do, and of course, subscribe to our socials. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Brilliant. Thanks. And thanks so much to everybody for all of the fantastic support that we have been getting over the last couple of weeks. It's really great for us. And if there is anything that you would like discussed on the show, you have any questions for us, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Send us a direct message, send us an email, whatever it is. We'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks so much. And we will see you next week.